in California, in new cars, I should say, in 2030. So, the whole idea being that they're going to have all new cars are going to have to be electric. Now, you might be able to get away to a certain degree with that in California because the weather, as you say, it's not that cold and batteries last longer. So we have in Canada, we would have a serious battery problem. And of course, then there's the whole battery disposal issue, which is another question to bring up. Haven't even touched on that. So there are all of these issues. I don't know. Here's
what the fallout of this is going to be. Let's assume they go ahead with this legislation. States like Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona are going to see a massive uptick in out-of-state sales to the people of California for gasoline-powered cars. Because what would stop you from going over the border to Nevada, going to a car dealership and buying the car you want versus the one the government says you should have? That's a fair question. I don't know what. I'm sure that the regulations have that the law has addressed that, but I don't know all of the details. But that's something to check on for sure, Nick. Yeah. Well,
and the other thing is this: California, in terms of its electrical generating and distribution system, it's nothing short of abysmal, and to the point where the biggest power distribution network, Pacific Gas and Electric (PG&E), actually had to file for bankruptcy or bankruptcy protection last year. I'm pretty sure they're out of it now, but there were very significant infrastructure problems, aging lines, aging towers, etc., and a number of the wildfires that have occurred in California in recent years have been caused or precipitated by poor electrical infrastructure.
They had transformers in the grid because PG&E went so heavy into wind and solar. They stopped upgrading the equipment they have that was not fed by those kinds of methods of creating power. They had transformers that were 100 years old, and those are the ones that were catching on fire. They had no business being in a modern power grid, should have been in a museum, if anywhere, if not scrapped for the copper they contain. And they completely dropped the ball. That's where I remember that story very, very well, that these people thought that, let's go with wind and solar, but they never bothered to keep maintain what they already had. And now you've got rolling blackouts and brownouts. You've got fires, all because the main electrical provider was given so much incentive to create wind and solar farms that there was nothing left to do the maintenance with, and now they're paying the price. And this is the kind of place with 36 million people. Well, that number's dropping fast, but 36 million people lived in California the last I checked. That's almost the size of Canada, for crying out loud. And you want them all driving electric cars? Can you imagine plugging them in and all of a sudden all the lights go out? That's not all that unrealistic.
As I think, who was it? It was either Daffy Duck or one of those characters that would get hit on the head, and that's what he would say. He'd be falling or tripping over himself, woozy, and you'd see this, the animated stars above his head, and
right.
and that's what he'd go, and the lights went out all over the world.
Well, that's what's going to happen in California if they try to plug in too many of those electric cars. Well, they just don't have the infrastructure for it.
Well, maybe that's the best thing for the for these out of control wildfires is that a couple of people too many are going to plug in their new electric cars. And then
shut the power off.
That's right. The power will be shut off there.
Well, with any luck to go along with that, what you'll see happen is all of a sudden the whole state of California. We'll just slide off into the Pacific, and all the fires will go out that way.
Oh, dear, oh, dear. Well, I certainly don't wish that on our friends in California.
No. I'm not looking for disaster to befall those people, other than the ones they self-inflict.
Yeah, and I see that Bruce, Caitlyn Jenner is planning on running for the governorship of California as a Republican, no less.
You've got to be kidding.
No, seriously.
Bruce Jenner is running for the government of
Bruce / Caitlyn. Yeah.
No, he's Bruce. I don't care what anybody says. He's Bruce.
Oh, dear. Yeah.
Yeah, he almost got himself in a ton of trouble by threatening, what's his name?
Ben Shapiro.
Yeah.
Was that him?
That was him. He said, if you don't shut up, I'm going to take you outside and send you home in a hospital.
Really?
In an ambulance.
I didn't. I saw the sequel. I saw the sequence, but I clearly didn't recognize. Bruce / Caitlyn.
Well, believe me, it's not a pretty sight.
But I remember when he was, an Olympic champion.
Yep, so do I. He was on what box of cereal was he on?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know, Wheaties or something like that. Was it
something like that? But he was. I can still see him. He was a high jumper,
decathlon. So high jumping was one of the sports, but there are 10 sports in the decathlon. There are some races running. There's long jump. There's high jump. There's I believe shot put, javelin. So it's a whole series of sports.
Yeah,
and
there was one where he had his arms raised in victory after he completed a contest, and I can still see it. He had his hair feathered and parted in the middle. Not that I noticed those things, but that was the style of the time.
Right.
And he's come a long, torturous way since then. Oh, well, you know what, Joseph? This has been a great night. It's been a lot of fun. There's still a few little quirks and wrinkles to hammer out, but we'll get it. And we'll be able to spread our word, spread our gospel even further.
Are you allowed to use that word on the air?
Well, I just find it rather ironic to say that in the company of a Jewish co-host.
Yeah, well, yeah. I'm just looking at my clock here. We have a couple of minutes more.
Well, let me dive into one last topic.
Okay, make it quick, real fast.
Okay, real fast. One of the things we didn't get to tonight, and we'll put this in that file, and maybe we'll get to it. The government of Canada is changing the rules around the boating card, and now they want if you want to be a certified boating safety instructor, which I didn't even know we had any. It's going to cost you $5,000 every 5 years to do it. If you want to take the boating course, because of that increase to the particular trainers involved, it's going to make your course a lot more expensive. This is going to have an impact far beyond our ability to get into tonight. But think of the charter boats. Think of the fishing tournaments. Think of the the cabin cruising industry, like on, excuse me, on the Rideau Canal, or the Trent Severn Waterway, or the Welland Canal. There are companies out there who charter, 25, 30-foot cabin cruisers for a week at a time or more, and some people spend their whole summer on these things, just floating around, enjoying the bounty of, I want to say the bounty of the universe, but the sights and sound that come with living on a boat. And now that's going to be driven into the ground, because nobody's going to want to spend $5,000 every 5 years and teach a course that most people don't need, because most people know the basics, at least, of how to operate. We certainly didn't have a dearth of people being killed on boats because they didn't know how to drive them. It happened, but certainly no more often than riding a bicycle or things like that. It wasn't a leading cause of death by any stretch. And it's going to have a huge detrimental effect on the tourism and on the boating industry, shutting down marinas, shutting down boat repair facilities, putting cabin cruiser companies out of business if this goes ahead. And it just blows my mind they would even try.
And with that, ladies and gentlemen...
believe me, I could go off like a rocket on that one.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll pick it up next week. Anyway, this has been a strange show, but it was fun.
Well, that's live radio for you.
That as well, it's something. Anyway, look, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in for both the live show and again, if you're listening to the podcast, or if you missed any part of the show tonight, especially for those of you who are listening on FM radio, who for whatever reason only were getting my sound. Apparently, at least that's what the technicians told me. Hey, listen, you can check out the podcast and listen to what Nick had to say as well. Yeah. You can catch it at the thingmakeandshow.com, which is, it's ThinkRadio.ca. But if you go to ThinkRadio.ca, you have to scroll down and then select the Nick and Joe Show, and it takes you to the page. So you can go directly to thingmakeandshow.com, and that'll take you right to the page. And then you can listen to the podcasts of this show and previous shows. Okay, and I think that's pretty much all I have to say for tonight, Nick.
All right, well, that wraps it up for Joseph and I. We will see you all again next week. In the meantime, ubi caritas et amor, Deo CBS. Good evening, God bless. Don't let anything disturb your peace, and may you have a fair wind in the following sea.